All right, and we are back with another episode of Disrupting Recruitment. And this week we have Evan Herman on, and it's great to have you, Evan. Why don't we start off with just telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a recruiter for the past 10 years that has recently, like a lot of other recruiters out there, found myself in transition and a lot of instability out there. And I decided, seeing the writing on the wall in the market, to launch my own practice that I call Hermanomics without the E in my last name, that essentially is a matchmaker like a good recruiter, except I find tools, specifically talent acquisition tools for employers rather than people.
Which actually I find fascinating because you see this a lot in marketing and sales and marketing, with HubSpot consultants um, and different things like that. But there's not really there is definitely a gap in the market in the recruitment marketing world and recruitment tools in terms of having sort of that broker that can help you to identify which tools best fit your tech stack, your specific needs. I mean, a gazillion different applicant tracking systems out there, CRMs. There's tools popping up every day now with AI technology, and it's a lot for recruiters to understand and VPs even to, as they're looking at how they can make their team more effective, more productive, um, and that sort of thing. So hats off to you for doing that. I think it's an important opportunity and definitely a gap in the market within the recruitment tech space.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's been quite the ride, but as you can imagine, especially solopreneurship, every day is different. It's exciting. I have a reason to talk to just about anybody with this new practice. It's frustrating. It's worrying. It's all of the above.
Yeah,
It's
it's
dramatic.
it's it's definitely a gamut of emotions being an entrepreneur, that's for sure. So, what type of companies do you work with? Like, do you work with mainly large companies, small companies, everything in between?
Yeah, because as you mentioned, being a broker and trying to be a quote honest broker at that, it requires the highest degree of respect and trust and rapport. And so I really just kind of to start and following wherever my personal relationships that I have that go. And so with my background, I've worked at PNC Bank, Truist Bank, some other financial services company. I was in wealth management before I got into recruiting. So it's disproportionately to start in financial services, but I can work with just about anybody. It's just my relationships, for the reasons mentioned, are disproportionately in financial services. But I can work with just about anyone, and um, as many of the tools are really designed for more enterprises, that's where I tend to stay. But I do hope for a sweet spot of more that mid market, those 2,000 to 10,000 employee companies. I think are a good market for just about anybody in tech or recruiting to be pursuing, as they don't have a lot of that bureaucracy and can make decisions a lot easier, and who's in charge is a lot clearer than at some of these large enterprises.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And we're seeing a lot more tools pop up that are available for those sort of mid-size companies and that sort of thing. So let me ask you then, when you're working with these companies and trying to identify their tech stack and where the gap is, what are you seeing as um, something that's sort of is there a pattern of companies missing the boat on a certain part of the process, not necessarily a specific tool, but a certain part of the process where they you feel that they can have a big impact? Like what's that tool that everybody's sort of missing the boat on?
Yeah, I will try and refrain as part of my pitch is actually being technically vendor neutral, trying to find the right match for everyone. And I do believe there is a right match for every problem, for every employer, for every talent acquisition team out there. That being said, since going to market with this, the main thing I've identified, which is really, I guess, more of a just a personal theory, but that's proven to be reality since I launched Hermenomics, is that you can't just be a talent intelligence tool or a sourcing tool now. I think you got to be both. And I'm seeing the convergence and the need for the convergence of both in one tool. Because there's just always a gap if you're using a completely separate tool to find, like, hey, where are all the female Java developers located so we can make sure we have a gender diverse team, and where should we locate, or what geographic location should we recruit from? And then, okay, you found that. Now, well, who are those people? Like, specifically, and how do I contact them? What's their contact info? Things like that. And there are tools coming out that do very much combine these two needs. And all I'll say is, if I was just a pure talent intelligence tool, I'd be worried right now.
Yeah. So what do you mean by talent intelligence tool? If somebody's listening, going, what are you talking about?
Yeah, so that's where it's when I'm talking about talent intelligence in terms of the answer I just gave, I'm talking about like more just pure data. Like, hey, where is this talent can be found? Like talent mapping, but it's not necessarily helping you actually source a specific person. It's telling you where the talent is without giving you insights, really, if any, if at all, on specific people for you to contact, let alone how to contact them. What's their email address? Is there an online resume for them? Do they have a personal website? Do they have a GitHub page? Things like that. It's more like somehow, some way, through magic and subscribing to services and buying, access to these databases. Here's where all the Java developers are located, using the previous example, or here's where all the nurses are that you need in this location, without actually helping you put in play an actual real life person at all.
Mm, yeah, I mean data is certainly important in the process, but it's important to align that data with a specific person or a specific candidate. We're big believers in the fact that the more data you have on a candidate, if you look at sports, in recruiting in sports, and I make comparisons in recruiting in sports, building championship teams all the time. Uh, the number of data points that a team would have on a prospective athlete that they're trying to recruit or bring to their team is astronomical. They know everything about them. And that's not something I think we do a good job of in recruitment, is really understanding the data. We talk a big game around skills and cultural fit and all of that horse caca, but we don't do a really good job of uh, taking the data and knowing what we know about a candidate, and pairing that up with um, what we're looking for and how we fill that gap. And I think you're right. I think it needs to be sort of a sourcing and talent analytics tool combined, that sort of says, this is all of the nurses in Austin, Texas that are uh, you know registered RNs or whatever, and these are all the data points that we have on them. I think uh, we I talked a little bit with Stan on our last episode about like CV Wallet and Web3, and uh, you know uh, candidates being able to create a an online digital profile of all of their verified skills and that sort of thing. And I think that's a little bit of the way of the future of sort of getting rid of the resume and the cover letter and all that stuff, and having sort of a verified profile online of this is me and this is all of my data and this is how you access it. What are your thoughts on if you were so when you're consulting with your companies, your clients, um, and this answer is hard to kind of make a generic one because it varies from company to company and depending on their size and their needs. But if you were to recommend the perfect sort of tech stack, and again, not specific tools like you need this tool and this tool, but this type of tool versus this type of tool. What do you look for in an ideal tech stack for a mid-size or an enterprise level company?
Sure, and then yeah, as you might imagine, that's not such a simple answer, especially as I'm trying to pitch myself as a very specific matchmaker. Because the tools, like it's on paper that you can find the tools, you can go to a group and be like, "What tools should I use?" And then it's like, just like a doctor, there's lots of like pharmaceuticals or lots of procedures they can do, and it's up to me to get down and dirty and make a specific match and also help them negotiate. And also it's not just enough to be the best tool. But yeah, that being said, um I try and match the tools with the human team that they have available, um because if you don't have, you can have a great, like, say, data minded tool, that gets you great data, but if you don't have people on the other end that are data minded, then the tool is going to go to waste. I once saw a stat from the great Farrah Reeves. If your audience doesn't know her, she's now at Phenom People after years of being an independent product manager, and she had a presentation at the HR.com conference in May in Phoenix that I was at, and said 70% of talent acquisition tech spend goes unused. And who knows how scientific or how accurate that is. But all I know is all the other people that, like, from some otherwise people I respect, like some of the top influencers, top recruiters from top organizations, were sitting there shaking their head. Yeah, that seems about right in our experience, particularly at the enterprise level. So yeah, you do think it's important. Obviously, you got to have an ATS. Hopefully, you're an organization. I never like to badmouth anyone, but everyone knows the issues with Workday. Like, it just kind of got imposed on us in talent acquisition, and it does, uh, depending on the preference of the decision makers at companies, it does eliminate a lot of your options if you have Workday imposed on you, in your as your ATS and your tech stack. Um, but short of that, I do think whenever possible, companies should have at least one dedicated sourcer, if not, again, an ideal world. These times notwithstanding, a 1-to-1 ratio of recruiters to sourcers. And then that opens up all sorts of possibilities of leveraging the tools out there. Because a lot of these tools are designed for more for sourcing. And then if you are keep a very lean team of so-called full life cycle sourcers, which between you and me, I think is mostly a misnomer, they don't have the time to properly source, and therefore they won't have the time to use all these great tools that combine sourcing and talent intelligence, contact info gathering, data points such as, hey, this IP address, has been coming to your website every third day but never actually applied, and helping you figure out who that person actually is. All those tools aren't going to go to use. They'll be part of that 70% of unused TA tech spend if you don't have the personnel on the other end to properly take advantage of these great tools.
Yeah, it's important to have that sort of quarterback that is pulling all of these tools together and making sure that they're communicating. And one of the biggest frustrations that I see in the industry, when people are trying to put together tech stacks, is trying to get everything to integrate together. How does like to get tool A to talk to tool B and tool C and D, because I think gone are the days where there's companies like Phenom that try to be everything to everybody, and they don't want to play with anybody else. But uh, you know, companies are really trying to find a specific tool for each function of the process, and I think that's what they should be doing. I think ATSs should be from the higher, like once they apply on, but they shouldn't get involved in the top of the funnel and middle of the funnel. But um, so you talked about different tools and pairing that up with a good sourcer and all this stuff. But what's your thoughts on um, AI driven tools that are trying to come out and really make the front end of the process really candidate driven and candidate engaged, so that there's bots now that can talk to candidates. There's really you could essentially have a process where they don't talk to a recruiter until they're ready to talk to the hiring manager. What's your thoughts on AI sort of filling in the gap?
Sure. For your audience purposes, and this to me results in the great distraction debate that I privately call it in our space about AI. We have to separate staffing from recruiting and recruiting from sourcing. They're just all like different sports entirely. It's like the difference, but highly related. Like it's like the difference between ice hockey and field hockey, or baseball and softball. But at the end of the day, they are all separate sports in our space. So, assuming you're talking about recruiting, I've been a big proponent of AI and automation are help. Like, look what I do for a living. I can't be an enemy of the tools or anti like AI, anti automation, anti technology, and do what I'm be doing. But at the end of the day, this is recruiting is a human to human business, and what AI and automation I say will do best is free up the best recruiters to do their best work, which is be human. No AI, no automation, no technology can ever be as good of a human as a real life human recruiter. And I think what they're good at is what I call recruitment task outsourcing. They can automate the scheduling, all the pain in the ass things. Like, you don't want your best recruiters that are good at talking to people, finding people, engaging people, getting them in the pipeline, selling them on an offer, selling them on interviewing further when maybe they're more reluctant. There's no replacement for that. If you free them up to have more time to be engaging human to human with candidates, then that technology is great. But those that are pitching themselves like recruiters are dying and are going to be replaced by recruiters, they're already facing a reality check. I've
I think
Yeah, I've spoke with a couple of tools like that. They've gained a bit of notoriety, and at the end of the day, it's going to be a human that has to buy your tool. So telling the people that your whole team is going to be replaced by me isn't exactly the best sales pitch, even if it's true.
Well, I think a lot of companies are looking for ways to save money, and the idea of having a tool that can have conversations 24/7 and manage that process 24/7 increases productivity extremely highly. But I think for me, it's all about having the right tools in place to guide the candidate through the process at their own pace, so that the recruiter who is good at developing relationships can do what they do best with candidates who are ready for that step of the process. So instead of having, I do believe that sourcing is a giant waste of time. I think what you're doing is trying to uh, most companies spend, as James Ellis puts it, most companies spend 95% of their effort trying to speak to 5% of the market that everybody's trying to speak to. And the idea was, like if I can get sourcers or staffing firms that can headhunt for me and whatnot, that will um, go out and find that passive talent that's not ready to have a conversation and get them in the process. But I can tell you right now, if they're having a conversation with you, they're having a conversation with somebody else. Um, no candidate,
That's
well, very few
I'm not
candidates.
going to dispute it. I think that's mostly true, but kind of like me as a matchmaker, and for tools in recruiting, if you have a quality sourcer, they should be able to find some of those people that others are not finding a way to engage with. I do agree that on paper that it's easy as ever. If you define sourcing simply as finding people, not actually getting them into play and selling them on like engaging with you further, then interviewing, and then ideally, of course, being hired, um, then yeah, sourcing can be in the terms of just finding people and the research and the wasted time, as you put it, can be displaced by technology, and that's why I advocate for some of those. They're huge; they can be a huge time saver. But at the end of the day, good recruiting is being a good matchmaker, and if you find for that more passive candidate, um, I prefer the term more reluctant candidates. Like they're not actively applying to jobs, but yeah, with the right engagement, the right outreach, with the right message and the right match for their career, they might be at least willing to engage with you. And I think there's very few like truly like passive, not open at all to, especially in this type of market, that just aren't open to new opportunities at all, no matter what anyone says out there. And I think the elite sourcers are able to tap into those more reluctant people, find out your value proposition to their career, make a match, and get them to at least speak with you.
For sure. Everybody is uh, willing to entertain an offer at the right time, or an opportunity at the right time. And, you know, definitely a good sourcer can sort of sell them on that and why it's a good company and whatnot. But having a strong employer brand makes that job a lot easier for them. If I'm a sourcer from Disney and I'm calling, people are going to pick up the phone because who doesn't want to talk to Disney, right? And I think that's where technology and the front end of the process really can play a big difference in, um, sort of engaging candidates at their own pace and just teeing them up for, the recruiters or the sourcers or whatever, however you want to do your process on the back end. If you have the right chatbot and the right conversational AI, and a good automation tool that sort of tracks candidate engagement and sends the right message and drives them through the funnel. And then you have sort of skill assessments that sort of are picking up what they're capable of along the way. Uh, well, just gone are the days where a candidate wants to talk to a recruiter at the first of the process. They really are sort of in the mindset of, I want to know what I'm getting myself into before I have a conversation with the human. Um, and so that's why, Candidate Hub, we're really focused on um, capturing that engagement and allowing that personalization at scale so that, we can match opportunity with readiness. So those recruiters that are wicked and strong at having those conversations and saying, this is why you should join our company versus company B. Um, and, uh, just getting them together and having conversations at the right time. And then you've got poetry, for example, that just came out from Adam Gordon, where you can store sort of all of those stories of, this is why our company is better than company B, or, all of those sort of pitches and wins and things that we've done, so that recruiters can have those right conversations. at the right time and with the right candidate. Um, so, uh, what I guess what are your thoughts on sort of pulling that all together? We sort of touched on this a little bit, but if I want to pull that all together, where does that line go between technology and an actual human? And what parts would you automate of the process versus and get AI involved versus spending time as a human trying to sort of do it all or whatever? Like what's that right blend? And again, I'm these questions are hard to answer depending on the size of the organization because it's going to be different for every
Right.
company. But just sort of in a broad sense, what does that line look like for you? And um, how would you set up sort of that top of funnel tech for a company to tee that up, for those recruiters?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, canon experience is first off everything. So it all starts at that initial, as we've touched on briefly, and you just did in the first part of your comment there. Um, yeah, the first, sometimes in other areas of life, they say the first 24 hours are the only 24 hours in like a war or something like that to respond. Well, in the war for talent, the first 24 minutes are the only 24 minutes. And yeah, technology could come and play, like you talked about, like at odd hours. Like let's say you're recruiting like frontline workers or nurses, that really can't be on their phones or really are involved in a life and death matter on an almost daily basis. They're not going to respond to you during your recruiter's business hours. They're going to apply on their own time and they're going to want to be engaged, therefore, on their own time. And there are some great tools out there that do allow you through technology to do, some of those. I've always said that recruitment tasks can be outsourced. So some of that initial engagement, hey, thank you for applying. Like, what led you to be interested? You can have some conversational AI and automated chatbots, that could do some FAQs, maybe help people decide, like, hey, like, we saw you applied for this, tell us a little more about yourself, like, and then maybe match them up for other jobs. Maybe they apply to a job that isn't a good fit, or maybe it's one of those, the recruiter hasn't gotten around to closing the rec. That always happens, and they apply like when it's still technically open, but it really isn't. And helping redirect those people as soon as possible when they're engaging with you. You should find a way without asking your human recruiters to work 24/7 or rotate them in 24/7 shifts. Get some minimal viable engagement to help facilitate candidate engagement and smooth out the process, streamline the process, and ultimately get better hires more quickly.
You're right on that 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours. And that's where, again, going back to the 595 thing, like especially when you're dealing with that 5% of the market that everybody's dealing with, speed is important and time kills deals. So if you're not jumping on them right away with your best experience, your best opportunity, your best offer, somebody else is going to grab them. And that's why I think in the front end of the process, having conversational AI, marketing automation, um, and all of these tools, so that it's driven at a candidate's own pace. They're engaged at the level that they need to be at the time they need to be. Um, it allows the candidate to. It allows you to deal with that 95% of the market that nobody else is dealing with, and build a funnel of candidates. And one of the things that I think, obviously, I mean, I built a whole business around it. One of the great um, challenges of our industry is you said it. I have a candidate that applied, and maybe they applied after I just didn't get a chance to close the rec, so I don't even see the resume. Or they were a silver medalist this time, but they were just missing this one skill, or this person was just this much better than them, or they just weren't ready at all for this opportunity. They look like a really potentially good candidate, but they're just not ready at all. But all of this data that companies are going out and acquiring on candidates, sort of goes to the ATS to die, and because recruiters are spending time just really putting out fires, and they're trying to be as proactive as they can, but they're overwhelmed with oftentimes 50 recs or even 100 recs at a time. So they don't have the time to go in and mine that database of candidates and seeing what's, who's applied in the past and whatnot. So what we're seeing in the industry is that candidates are being pulled from the applicant tracking system only about 10% of the time. So companies are only going back to their existing data that they've already spent all of this time sourcing and marketing and paying for. They're only going back to that about 10% of the time.
Seems
Um,
about right.
yeah, I was going to say, does
That's
that
one of those
feel
seems
right to
about
you?
right. I don't yeah, it doesn't matter how scientific. Yeah, that's another one of those seems about right stats. Okay. I'll accept that.
So, yeah, what to you? What's the answer to that? I think that's a golden opportunity that needs to be capitalized on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes into there's a lot of things like without trying to knock my own prospective employer customers, there I think I preach in the choir with you and your audience. There are so many things that are just ass backwards in our space. And another post as a follow on to the one that led you to have me here on the show was companies are going the wrong way. It's during times like now, like rough times, uncertain times like now are when the number one time to engage with talent and speak with you. So even the most passive of candidates not actively applying is probably going to be, if you have a decent, opportunity, they're probably at least willing to like speak with you and form a relationship with you, if only for later on, like as no one feels comfortable right now in their situation. And they're laying off sourcers before they're laying off the recruiters. And I'm like, no, now is the best time to begin pipelining for the future and forming relationships. And then when you are hiring again, now it time to source should ideally be zero later on. And then if you, once you are hiring again and need more offers generated, offers approved, working with the HRBP and finance and all the stuff that entails what I call them so-called full life cycle recruiters because they don't, most of them don't actually source with the stat just mentioned. Uh, you need more of them when times are good because ideally your sourcers in the bad times built up a great database. So you need comparatively more recruiters during the good times and more sourcers to build up your database and pipeline for the future during the not so good times like we have now. And they for companies for whatever reason have that backwards. They're retaining more of the recruiting team and sometimes let go all the sourcers if they're really like not doing much hiring at all. And I'm like, no, this is like the number one pipelining market like since spring 2020 that we'll probably see in our lifetime.
Since we've talked about sports a couple times, so already, I've said this before. I've said it again. I wrote a blog about it, and I'll keep preaching it, until somebody proves me wrong. But um, there's three ways to build a championship team. It's free agency, trades, and draft. And free agency is the most expensive way that you can acquire top star. If you're going to go out and try to get Sidney Crosby, or you're going to go out and try to get LeBron James, or those types of talent, when they become available on the free agent market, you're going to have to pay big dollars, and you're going to have to be a team that they're going to want to go to. So, you need to invest a lot of money in employer branding, which you should be investing in employer branding anyway. And so it's a really, really expensive way to bring in talent, and really inefficient way to bring in talent, because you're fighting for that 5% that everybody wants. Uh, Trades, again, cost a lot of money because you're trying to buy somebody from another team. So, if you're paying for recruiters to go out, or sourcers to spend all of their time trying to find talent that's working for another team, and then convince them to come work for you. You're going to have to pay them a top dollar offer. Then you have pay equity issues on your own team. And again, there's like a whole bunch of reasons. But the draft, the one that only the true fans follow, who's coming up through the pipeline, because not every year you get to draft a guy like Connor Bedard, who's going to be a superstar in the league from the first day he steps on the ice. um, you spend a lot of time building that pipeline of talent through junior, OHL, uh, the American League into the NHL, or college ball into whatever, right? So, um, and because we're so busy trying to put out fires and be reactional and transactional, just trying to fill holes, you're right. Now is the time to sort of shift that mindset of, I need to focus on building that pipeline of talent, of raving fans that are becoming engaged with our brand. That when I need a Java developer, or I need a nurse, or I need a whatever, there's a group of people that are like fighting for the opportunity to make the big club and be the next person that sort of breaks the lineup and makes the team.
Mm.
I think that's where recruitment needs to focus. The problem is that's a long term play, and people are too worried about today to plan for tomorrow.
Exactly. Another post of mine last week. The number one concern, and I'm sure you see this in your practice, is how do I keep my job, from talent acquisition leaders, the decision makers. Two, how do I keep my team's jobs as much as them as possible? And then maybe three, like, how do I solve like actual problems using tools and other services outside my own company? And yeah, they just have other things. People are focused on putting out their own fires, because also, as I'm sure you've heard, many teams went overboard with laying off recruiters, and now they're just stuck with way too lean of a team, even with these more lean times. Um, the, some of our recruiters that are still gainfully employed, one of the lucky ones, they're as busy as ever, because now they're stuck with a higher workload stuck on them.
Well, it's like firing salespeople when your business is slow, right? I can't afford these these expensive salespeople. Well, those are the people you need, because they're the ones that are going to get you business to turn this around. And it's the same thing with recruiters. Like, recruiters, talent acquisition is so often viewed as a cost center, but it really is a revenue generation division, because without people, there is no company and there is no revenue. And so, the really good companies know what their revenue per employee is, and every time you hire somebody, your revenue per employee should be going up, even if it's a completely 100% overhead position. It still should be driving value to the bottom end of your business. Um, and so, laying off your recruitment team, any part of your recruitment team, in a market where it's slow, is detrimental, I think, because when the market picks up, now you've got people that are learning about your business because you've just hired a new recruitment team. So they're learning. It's like bringing in a new salesperson to learn your product so they can sell it. Your business is your product. So if you have a recruitment team that's still, they've, and you've stuck with them through the hard times, they're going to be passionate about your business. They're going to love your business. They're going to understand your business, and they're going to understand your competitors, and they're going to be able to sell your business versus one of your competitors. Um, but if you keep cycling through your recruitment team because you hire when you need to and then you lay them off when it's slow, it's like hiring new salespeople to come in and learn your product and sell it, and then lay them off and bring in new salespeople to learn your business and sell it. It's counterproductive. But this is the time to have them building that pipeline and having those conversations with people who are not ready yet, but we know they're going to be ready down the road.
Exactly, especially for those like tough to fill roles. And I have been with my new practice and what I'm doing now, been uh, getting more familiar with the healthcare recruiting space. And I was at the Indeed conference in Atlanta, and as you, for reasons you and your audience might be able to imagine, a lot of their very top customers were in healthcare, specifically nurse recruiting and staffing organizations. And one company said that, yeah, their biggest challenge is, they're in like West Texas. And so, right, as long as a place exists, like that job can't be remote. And as long as a place exists, there's people living there, they're going to need hospitals, and those hospitals are going to need nurses and doctors and other people. And right, these nurses often have like so many options, and it's like, how do I get them to come to like Midland, Texas? And there's just such high turnover, and the only option, I guess, is to go to these traveling nurses, and even those are tough and they're more
Mm-hmm.
expensive. And get them like, hey, it's just 3 months, see a new part of the country that you've never been to, etc. And it's like, hey, the answer is, whenever you get a chance, even when you don't need a nurse, always be on the lookout and at least be engaging with them, even if you don't have a need right then and there. And yeah, companies huge like they're from their own ATS alone, missing out on a huge opportunity. But also just, yeah, whether it's social media or people playing around on your website and giving you little cookies of who they are and hints of who they are and teasing you, you got to capture that. Or finding alternative strategies, and don't be going after the same exact people as your competition. And try and find a way to be where they are, like, rather than the traditional recruiting sites and finding people, I don't know, like, join like, using the Midland, Texas example, like join um Midland natives, like, so maybe there's someone that's like eager to return home and like, hey, does anyone know a nurse that's eager to return home to Midland? And it might to them be a cool place, rather than uh, I guess the perception that it's not so desirable a place to be a nurse at.
Well,
Things like that. You got to just be where your audience is, and you got to engage them when they're willing to engage with you, whether you're hiring or not. The problem is waiting until after a fire has erupted to try and put it out. Why not um, have the solution ready to go rather than wait for a fire to come
I'm
out?
sure there's probably a nurse somewhere who's tired of all of the ruckus and commotion and pace of a large city hospital that would probably love the opportunity to go to a small town and have a much quieter job. Anyway, listen, I really appreciate your point of view. I think what you're doing is needed. There's so much tech out there and so much popping up every day that having somebody that can kind of understand what your business needs and how it will better uh, solve some of its challenges using the right technology is important. So, thank you very much for being on today. It was a great conversation. I will definitely tag your LinkedIn and all that stuff so people can get a hold of you if they're looking for somebody can help them with understanding their tech stack and what's missing. Definitely reach out to Evan. So thanks a lot, man. It was great having you on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always enjoy these conversations, and overall, against all hope, trying to put a dent in some of the problems that we're facing, and hopefully change some minds or open up some people's minds about, there are better ways to improve this wonderful
It's
profession
all
we
we
have
can
here.
try to do. All right. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks.